Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
The work done by the thousands of North Dakota oil and natural gas workers is working to improve energy independence and national security. Working to make America more competitive around the world. And working to provide a better today and tomorrow for everyone in North Dakota and across our country. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas works for our future. North Dakota Petroleum Foundation, advancing the possibilities.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk. And, during the 2023 session, if I told you that one of the hottest issues, one of the issues that got the most testimony at its committee hearings, that provoked the most amount of emails and letters and everything else to lawmakers and phone calls, was chronic wasting disease, would you believe me? It was. It didn't get a lot of attention in the news media. A lot of you may be wondering, what is chronic wasting disease and why was it a hot issue at the legislature? But it did. In fact, I think, and this is, don't quote me on this because this is just sort of me unofficially counting, but I'm pretty sure the House hearing on a chronic wasting disease bill got more testimony than any other bill at the legislature last session, including some of the culture war bills that we've talked a lot about. So this is a hot issue. Now, what is it? Chronic wasting disease. What North Dakota Game and Fish officials say, including scientists, including veterinarians, what they say is that this is a threat to North Dakota's deer herd, and the North Dakota Fish and Game Office, and they currently have this authority, but they need the authority to be able to regulate baiting as one hedge, or one, I guess, what do you want to call it, prophylactic against chronic wasting disease spreading in deer herds. Now, there is a faction of, I suppose, hunting interests who believe otherwise. They don't believe that chronic wasting disease is a threat. They don't think that North Dakota Game and Fish should have the ability to regulate baiting in hunting. Here to talk with us about that is Brock Wahl. Now, Brock is a fifth-generation North Dakotan. He's an avid hunter, avid fisher. He is the chairman of North Dakota Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And he's here to talk to us about this issue. Brock, how are you?
Well, hey, Rob, thanks for having me on today.
Give us a quick overview of this. What is all the turmoil about? Because again, if you start looking this up on social media, on Facebook, you are going to go down some rabbit holes with people making a lot of claims about a lot of things. What is going on here, my friend?
Yeah, it's sort of unfortunate. I think, in a lot of cases, I do want to be sympathetic to folks. I mean, I know that for some people who have grown up hunting over bait, I have friends that hunt over bait, and I know it's a challenging thing to stop doing, or to be told that, hey, you can't do this anymore.
What is hunting for people who aren't avid hunters? What does hunting over bait mean?
So setting out feed, or any type of attractants that, a mineral lick, there's mineral fluids that you dump on the floor, dump on the ground, attractants that are trying to bring that animal to an exact location, typically a very small spot. Sometimes it's an upright feeder that's got a timer on it, and at certain times it'll throw feed out. And then, they'll either sit in a tree stand or a ground blind in front of that, and then be looking to harvest a deer.
So at that point, is it hunting? I mean, it seems like that is more harvesting. You can do the same thing with cows. I mean, again, I'm not a sportsman, but it just seems like if you're guaranteed that a deer is going to be at a certain point at a certain time, it doesn't take some of the sport. And I know that's not what we're talking about, but it just seemed like it does take some of the sport out of it. But
I think that's a fair perspective, certainly, Chad. I don't, in terms of my organization, we're not going to get too involved in the ethics debate. I think it's understandable. I first started my archery career hunting over bait. I didn't have any archery mentors to speak of, and so it just seemed to me to make sense to go out and throw out some corn and sit over it and see what happened. Now, it didn't take me long, and I just kind of lost interest in that. It just didn't seem like something that I really wanted to devote doing. But I get it. If you're limited on time, you got some kids, or there's a variety of situations where I think that it's understandable. I can certainly sympathize with folks and why that's a tool they reach for when they come out hunting. I don't do it anymore, but I know plenty of people who do, and in some sense, I support the Game and Fish's regulations on wanting to ban bait where they find CWD. So that way, the people I know that hunt in places that don't have CWD can continue to use bait or hunt over bait longer, because I really think that in some sense that stopping these baiting practices where the disease is really help slow down that disease. I mean, it's really a common sense issue. I mean, if you can prevent animals from coming in and sticking their face in the same tiny little spot, is it really any wonder that that's going to spread disease? And I think that the science would back that up. I mean, we can find these infectious prions. We can find them in mineral licks. We can find them in feed. We can find them on feeders. So I don't think there's really any doubt about the fact that baiting is certainly exacerbating the spread of this disease.
As I understand it, Brock, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, how North Dakota Game and Fish handles this currently is if they detect chronic wasting disease in a certain area, they restrict bait hunting over bait, I guess, as you put it. They restrict that for a certain amount of time, and until basically the threat goes away. Is that fair to say?
Not quite. So basically what they do, you got the first part right. So if they find a CWD case, then they will ban baiting within a 25-mile buffer of that particular location. So any unit that touches that 25-mile buffer. So basically the 25-mile thing there is kind of the more important piece. So it's potential that, if a CWD positive is found that kind of straddles a unit, both units might come under a baiting ban. Now, I think it's really important to point out that over the, kind of all of the chaos and the insanity that was the 2023 legislative session around this issue, the Game and Fish did make some concessions to the baiting crowd and said, okay, well, listen, we're gonna try to give you the benefit of the doubt and say, listen, if we can go in and we can meet certain testing requirements, we'll lift those baiting restrictions, which I think, it's not something that my organization was very fond of. I mean, we would prefer that, restrictions on this type of stuff are tighter, not looser. But I can sympathize with the Game and Fish trying to find a balance to serve their stakeholders in a way that doesn't make everybody happy, but tries to still accomplish that goal. I think that's a fair approach for them to take. And so basically right now, if any of these units that see a positive case, if they can get 10% of their total tag harvest submitted for sampling and there's no positives found, they will lift those baiting restrictions. And additionally, right before, I guess it would have been last year, before the 2024 proclamation was signed, Governor Burgum and Director Jeb Williams sat down, and they did, and I'm not privy to those conversations, but they did try to make some other additional concessions by delaying the restrictions being implemented on some units and changing a little bit of how they were going to do this to try to do the best they could to give these guys as much opportunity as they possibly could before it went into a restriction.
Brock, can you talk a little bit about what chronic wasting disease is? And also, are we seeing an increase in North Dakota of the disease and the regulations that Game and Fish has historically put into place? Have they worked? I mean, do we know, is there things to back up the fact that this has worked? And so basically I'm asking, what is this? Why should we be concerned about it? And do these regulations work?
Mm-hmm. So you might be familiar with things like Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease or Kuru, or these are all prion diseases. Okay,
Oh, like mad cow disease that we heard
mad cow
several
disease, yes,
years ago.
correct.
Yeah.
So prion diseases are very unique. As a matter of fact, they really weren't proven until about 20 years ago that these prions, these infectious proteins, were actually causing an infection in animals. And it's kind of unique because scrapie in sheep and CWD in deer, those are actually the only two prion diseases that we know of that are horizontally and vertically contagious. So in other words, we've conducted research where we put a bunch of animals into a captive facility or into holding pens. We don't inoculate any of them, and then we introduce either one animal that's sick, or we introduce contaminated food dishes or contaminated materials, and then they document the spread throughout those animals. This has been done multiple times. We also know that they shed these prions in their saliva. We've been able to quantify this and to repeatedly show that these animals are shedding infectious material through their saliva, urine, and feces into the ground. And so once an animal gets this disease, basically, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with chickenpox in its relationship to shingles, right? So if you get chickenpox, you also get a virus that causes shingles, but that virus kind of actively does something to kind of go dormant. And then in certain conditions, you'll see shingles reappear, and all of a sudden you'll get shingles, right? And it could be because you're really stressed. It could be for a number of different reasons. Uh, CWD and these prion diseases are not like that. They are constantly working. It's just that they take a very, very long time. So there are some prion diseases in humans that take up to 40 years to actually kill you. In deer, with a vast majority of these animals, they're succumbing to the disease in about 16 to 18 months. So this is sometimes 2 years. And for the vast majority of that time period, they will appear completely normal. But what's happening is when they take those infectious prions in, they're going into their system. They'll filter up into the lymph nodes. Research has shown that after about 40 days, you can find those infectious prions in the lymph nodes. After the lymph nodes, it starts spreading into the central nervous system. And at the very end stage of the disease, when they perform a necropsy from an end stage animal, they'll actually find little microscopic holes in the brain. And that is the prions going in there and killing those cells in your brain. And that's what's causing that neurodegenerative disease that you see. And if you've ever seen an end stage CWD animal, it's a pretty gruesome sight. I mean, they're drooling and saliva dripping from their mouth. Their heads are shaking. They can't stand. People can walk right up to them. It's a pretty unique experience to see.
So is the spread? I mean, are we experiencing more spread of this disease in North Dakota? And again, to the sort of bigger point, is Game and Fish's regulations controlling it?
Mhm. No, that's a good question, and I think here's where the discussion gets a little bit enters into a gray area, if you will. So there's nothing scientific to show that a baiting restriction is going to stop CWD, and that's never been the claim of the Game and Fish. It's never been our assertion either that if we implement baiting bans, that this is going to stop the disease. I mean, for heaven's sakes, they're wild animals. You're not going to be able to stop all contact and all intermingling of animals without a doubt. But I think when you look at how the Game and Fish has gone about managing this disease, since 2009 they've invested $6 million into 500 hay yard projects for landowners, specifically to help landowners with protection of their their hay and silage piles and things like that. But I think secondarily, one of the benefits of that is it's trying or it helps kind of break up some of that winter herding that you might normally see from deer. And so, I think that in combination of that with baiting bans, carcass restrictions, I think in terms of those things, I think it's inarguable, or it's undoubtable that this is making a difference. I mean, when we look at the states and provinces that have had this disease for the same, or even in some cases longer than we have, that have not done these things, Saskatchewan, Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, these states are faring much worse off than we are in terms of positive cases, in terms of intensity of prevalences, in terms of geographic spread, and there really are no exceptions. I think you could probably use some states that are east of the Mississippi as exceptions to that, but there you're talking about populations that are, I mean, in order of magnitude more than what we have here in North Dakota. I mean, you're talking, states like Wisconsin, Mississippi, Missouri, where they're looking at, deer densities in the 70 to 120 deer per square mile. And in North Dakota, we're in the, you know, single digits for deer per square mile for the state. So I think those are just two radically different comparisons. But to directly answer your question, Chad, I do think that yes, these are making a difference. The increased harvest pressure on our particular two hotspots, we are sitting very good right now. The prevalence is low. We are preventing a lot of growth in terms of prevalence and in terms of geographic spread. And I think that passing this bill and the two that accompany it would be basically throwing a match on 15 years of management that we've already done.
Brock, one thing I want to make clear from earlier is that you said that they come in and the restriction, if they detect a CWD case, they come in and they restrict. It's only bait hunting that they're restricting though, right? Like you can still hunt normally, you just can't hunt over bait. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And there's been some discussion over this too. The Game and Fish does not have the legal authority, at least according to when Wayne Stenjum, rest in peace, when he was in office, or excuse me, when he sat in the chair at the Attorney General's office, he told the Game and Fish Department that they did not have the legal authority to ban supplemental feeding, because the Game and Fish normally or historically wanted to do that too. But he did say that he can ban the method of take, and so the Game and Fish said, okay, well we'll ban bait through proclamation, and it was kind of their they speculated, and I would agree too, that if they take away baiting, if baiting comes under restriction, there's going to be a lot of hunters that kind of abandon feeding too. I mean, because it kind of takes away that incentive, right? If you can't hunt over that corn pile anymore, there's probably just not as much incentive for you to make that financial investment into, continuing to come once a week and dump corn on that pile. So I think in a lot of sense, it's been very effective. And I think a lot of folks have been very understanding about the situation and certainly understand what the Game and Fish is trying to do.
So the other question I wanted to ask then, you said at one point that CWD was a disease that's both vertical and horizontal. I'm assuming that means that this can spread to other types of animals. So I guess my question is, North Dakota is an agriculture state. We have a lot of livestock herds. Is CWD a threat to livestock?
I don't want to be an alarmist here. I think from a biological standpoint, yes, we know prion diseases can jump species, but there's been nothing to show that CWD or chronic wasting disease can jump to cattle, which has been one of my main concerns. I don't want it to jump to cattle, but we already know a prion disease can affect cattle, and so I think there is a lot of concern out there that if we contaminate our environment too much, that it may happen. There has been some research very recently here where they were able to inoculate through oral inoculation feral swine. And so that is certainly a concern, although the swine really kind of seem to manifest the disease a little bit different. So again, I don't want to be an alarmist here. I don't know that it's a significant concern or something that we need to be raising alarm bells out, but it's certainly, one element of the concern from the Game and Fish Department too, is that, in some sense, I've heard it explained like running a lottery. A lot of this is about exposure, whether it's a deer getting sick or is somebody else getting sick from this disease. The more times we run this lottery, sooner or later, is somebody going to win? And when that happens, who is it going to be? What species is it going to be? And what are the ramifications of that going to be? And so I think that would be probably where a lot of the scientific community would probably kind of steer that conversation.
So Brock, the proponents of this, it looks to me like there's some legislators who are representing constituents just based on sort of where the legislators are all sort of from the same area. But the people who are supporting this bill and want to sort of tie the hands of Game and Fish's ability to regulate this, do they just flat not believe the science? Or is it just that change is hard, they want to do things the way, part of me thinks this is sort of a societal thing, right? We don't trust scientists. when it comes to game and fish. We don't trust them when it comes to inoculation of diseases. We don't trust teachers. We don't trust judges. We don't, is that what it is? Like, we don't want people to just tell us to do things differently than we've always done it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a little bit of both. I think that's a fair observation. And I think, there's a small subset of guys that are willing to say anything they can. I mean, there is certainly amongst that group, there is an active effort to spread disinformation. I mean, some of their claims are that it's not contagious, that it's never killed deer. I mean, I got a whole roll of photos here from a Wisconsin DNR project where they GPS collared animals. Everything from 20-month-old deer to 6 or 8-year-old deer. I got, little forky 2-year-old elk. I got deer standing in people's yards, unable to move. So, I mean, I think in some sense, what's out there in terms of science and what we know about diseases is pretty well established. And I'm not saying that we know everything about disease. There are certainly some things that we don't know, but I think some of those folks are certainly on a disinformation campaign, and that no matter what science you show them, no matter how many times we can prove that it's contagious, they're still going to say it's not contagious. But I think there's also a subset of those individuals that are kind of just reacting in emotion. And I don't judge them for that at all. I can understand their frustration. I can understand, how, like you said, how change is hard. And I certainly don't think less of them for, disagreeing or having a hard time with this. And I think it's upon us that, are able to kind of stay out of the emotional thing and look at all the facts that are out there and look at the research that's been done around this and come to the table and say, no, we got to do this. And I know that it's difficult, but this is something that needs to be done. My chapter would like the department in the state to take it a little bit further and to ban supplemental feeding in the exam units, because we believe that this is a very serious threat in terms of the spread of this disease. It's just when we can find these infectious prions in these locations, and deer are getting this disease, I just don't think it's particularly useful or particularly beneficial to be promoting this practice around the state. I just don't think that the benefits are there. But I guess to more answer your question, it's a little bit of both, and I don't, I'm not angry at any of them. I do wish that we could at least all agree on the facts, because that seems to be a very big challenge right now. Is there's a large portion of those folks that are spreading a lot of disinformation, which has made communication on this issue very difficult.
I don't think there's any question that emotion plays a part of it. I think Chad's right that the sort of cultural era we're living through, where, trust in various institutions has just gone through the floor, and there's people that are upset about it, and they're seeing a conspiracy behind every rock. When I watch some of the live streams of people, discussing, Jeb Williams, the head of Game and Fish and stuff, and some of the things they said about him was just, even if you disagree and you think this policy is wrong-headed and everything, it's uncalled for. Like, it's not, this is not a life and death issue. There's no reason to be treating people that way. I guess the other thing I was wondering is just politically, I mean, and maybe this is just where my mind goes as a reporter, is always, following the money. I mean, the level of activism that's involved here takes time and sometimes takes money, to travel to meetings, to travel down to Bismarck, to put in the time to talk to legislators and everything. It's not free. It takes your time, it takes your money, it takes resources. Is there an element here? So I guess that's what I'm thinking in my mind is, what's motivating this? What is making this worth people's time? Are there people, and I know this is a thing where they charge for access to their land. Are there people who are making money where they've got a good bait spot and they've got hunters who will come in and pay to access and get access to the animals that are showing up there? I mean, is that part of this, where people are making money off this and they don't want it to go away?
I think there's probably a subset of outfitters that are using bait to sell hunts to potential clients or having potential clients hunt over bait. But I don't think that's the main group that's opposed to this. I think, there's just been a lot of hunters, not a majority of hunters. I mean, if we look at, the participation in this, I mean, it's really been a small number of hunters that have been super vocal about this. So, I don't know. To me, I don't see the guiding or outfitting industry in terms of deer hunting and big game here as a huge industry. And I don't see that there being a lot of financial incentive for anybody. I mean, it's actually one of the things that these guys claim the Game and Fish is doing it for, is that they're doing it for federal money, but there's no reward or federal income from positive cases.
I guess what made me ask, I was thinking back to the debate we had over land posting, where we were moving towards, doing sort of digital posting, because a lot of landowners were saying that going out and posting those signs and maintaining the signs were a hardship to them. And we've done that. We've moved in that direction. But one of the arguments during that debate was that landowners are just tying up their land and charging people access. That was something I heard all the time. So I guess I wondered if that was a part of this, where, I mean, obviously, the resource being sold in that situation is essentially access to the animals. So if you have more animals on your property, I don't know, maybe I'm making too much out of this. I just, that was where my mind went, I guess. 3 bills, Brock, before the session. At this point, people who are interested in this, where should they go to find out more, or to get educated on this? Because I feel like this is something, even if you're not an avid hunter, and I would argue most North Dakotans are probably not very avid hunters. I mean, we have a very strong outdoor culture in North Dakota, no question about it. But, I mean, I think this is really under the radar for a lot of people. So they want to get caught up. Where should they go?
They can see us on Facebook at North Dakota Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We have a Facebook page there. We also have a podcast that you can listen to on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We actually just released an episode this morning with Dr. Jason Bart to talk about prions and prion diseases. And you can find that on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can email us at northdakota@backcountryhunters.org. And we do our best to respond to that hastily. I will say, though, we are 100% volunteer driven. We don't get paid a dime for any of the work we do. We are 100% volunteer. And so just be patient with us in terms of responses and whatnot. One point I'd like to make, though, before we close it out, is that, there's a lot of folks here that are on this baiting side of this argument. In addition to some of the conspiracy theories and stuff that they're saying that we can absolutely prove to be untrue. There's a property rights portion of this argument that I would really like to address, because I think that in some minds that there's folks that think that that's probably the most valid argument against it. But I would like to point to our Constitution, Article 11, Section 27 of the North Dakota Constitution, that says hunting, trapping, and fishing and the taking of game and fish are a valued part of our heritage and will be forever preserved for the people and managed by law and regulation for the public good. There's other references to our century code that would honor the public trust doctrine, that this concept that's held up by over a century of federal case law, that we all own the wildlife. All residents here in North Dakota own the wildlife. Yeah. And I would say that a single user group, archery hunters or rifle hunters who choose to hunt over bait, in the face of this disease, that their hunting practices do not take precedent over the resource itself or all of the other interests in that, or who hold interest in that wildlife ownership.
It's an important point, Brock. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Hey friends, we've got a new way for you to participate in the show. You can now call us or text us with your questions, comments, or anything you want us to discuss on Plain Talk. Just give us a call or shoot us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. It's super easy. Leave your message, tell us your name and where you're from, and we might feature it on an upcoming episode.
Thanks for listening to Plain Talk. Now let's get back to today's episode.
You'd expect to see the North Dakota oil and natural gas industry working at wells and processing facilities. What you might not know is our oil and gas industry also works to build roads, provide school funding, and even protect us from flooding by creating nearly 50,000 jobs statewide and generating billions of tax dollars annually to support our infrastructure, our great outdoors, and our schools. North Dakota Petroleum Foundation, advancing the possibilities.
Welcome back to the second half of Plain Talk, where I would be remiss if we didn't start by wishing Chad Oban a very happy 65th birthday. Chad.
Sweet burn.
You don't look a day over 60.
It is my 49th birthday. I will tell you the fact that we changed from a headshot of mine from 10 years ago to a current headshot. People are probably thinking, what's going on with that
I posted
guy? He's aging rapidly.
I posted my new headshot on Facebook to rave reviews. Man,
Really?
I don't know why people are so interested in my new profile picture. But I got like 200 likes. I always feel looking good, Port. Like I was feeling really good about myself that day.
It's because you got all those fancy glasses with the colorful rims. People like that you're taking your fashion to a new sort of place.
I do like a splash of color on my face.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think men should tell each other that they're handsome more often. Women compliment each other all the time. Men don't do it enough.
Well, let's not do it here, though. Okay. That's a little but I do appreciate the happy birthday wishes for my 49th birthday. And I'll be honest, I'm 365 days away from 50. So, I'm contemplating some stuff. I'm contemplating
staring into the abyss of time.
Yeah, I'm gonna start adding a little color to my life as well to make me feel young again.
There you go. Okay, well, that was a very interesting interview about. And I will say, like, you're not really a sportsman,
Nope.
a hunter. I hunted. My family's hunting tradition was very much in Alaska. When we moved down here, I think it was, for my father in particular, it was kind of hard to adapt to the way you hunt down here, and so it kind of fell off when we couldn't go back to Alaska to hunt anymore. But I do think this is an interesting issue. First of all, because I think it's important. I mean, hunting and tourism and all that stuff's very important part. Hunting and fishing, very important part. Culturally important, economically important. But there is something about this issue too that sort of plays into things that we talk all the time about the culture wars and populism.
Don't trust the science. Can't trust the science.
And it's I want to believe what I want to believe, and you're not going to convince me otherwise. I don't know that what Fish and Game is doing here is unreasonable. And I'm all for having debates about, even if you acknowledge that something is legitimately a problem, it's fair to have a debate about whether the regulation is worse than the disease.
Right.
I think that's a fair argument to have, but there's a point at which this doesn't seem draconian to me. They're not blocking hunting. They're just saying you can't do a certain type of hunting, hunting over bait, as Brock put it. I just don't. I don't know. It feels like the reaction to this is in excess of the seriousness of the issue.
Yeah, first of all, I found the interview very interesting. I like when we bring on people on things that I know nothing about, because it's like I just ask questions. They might be dumb or otherwise. But you know what I don't appreciate is these folks going after Game and Fish, because, Game and Fish historically has been an organization that is very non-controversial. They do their jobs. I think about Jeb Williams. I've seen him testify in things. I think I've met him a few times. This guy's not like part of some vast conspiracy against bait hunting. The guy wants to do right by sportsmen and by our wildlife. And I know other people that work at Game and Fish. They're literally just doing their job. They want to make sure we're following the rules.
Part of the reason they're in the jobs they're in is because they're passionate about hunting and fishing. They're anglers too. They're hunters too. They do this stuff as well. But they want to protect it for everybody. And I don't think you can deny that this chronic wasting disease is real. And we have to take steps to manage it. And we can have a good debate about it. But it doesn't seem like we're having a lot of this debate. Doesn't really seem to be about, how far should we go? What's the right regulation? We're having a debate about whether or not it even exists. And that's silly.
Well, and Brock also pointed out, and I think in the statement that they put out, his group, that last session, the Game and Fish sort of compromised a little bit to try to find a middle ground. And this is one of my frustrations in politics is, you compromise, and then the next session, one of the sides comes back and pushes even further. Like, why does anybody have what is the incentive to compromise on something if literally all you're doing is pushing it down the road another 2 years? Again, I trust science. That's generally where I'm at until somebody proves that I shouldn't trust them. And I think Game and Fish has a really incredible track record in this state. We should be proud of the work that they do.
They're not PETA, right?
No.
They're not trying to stop you from hunting. We just want to protect and listen, if we allow the deer herd to be diminished or to be diseased, that's going to hurt everybody. That hurts everybody. So that's not a good thing. All right. Let's talk about some of the other things going on. I mean, obviously, we're in the silly season of the legislature because all these bills are dropping. I mean, there was overnight, one of the days, like 100 bills dropped. There's so many things to talk about.
Deadlines are hitting on the House side, so we're going to see just bills dropping left and right.
Right. And one of the hard things is, of course, how much time do we spend talking about bills that may die immediately? It's hard to say. I don't know. I mean, I always get surprised. The bill that I think is going to die, and then all of a sudden, like the House passes it or the Senate passes it, and it's like, wow, really? We're keeping that one alive? So I don't know. But there are some things that are worth talking about. Two of them that I think kind of go hand in hand are the 10 Commandments mandate, which would essentially say that every classroom in North Dakota, K through 12, as well as our public universities, would be required to have a 10 Commandments poster. It has the text that has to be on the poster in the bill. And part of it is declaring that, the Christian God is the Lord. And then, of course, the 10 Commandments, as you're all probably familiar with. I think that's problematic from a constitutional perspective, in that we are a pluralistic society and we cannot be endorsed. I mean, the North Dakota Constitution says it. The First Amendment says it. We cannot be establishing a state religion. We cannot be endorsing one religion over the others. And by the way, if you put that poster in the room, the only way to make it constitutional is to let every religion start putting up displays. So if you want to put the 10 Commandments in there, I hope you're ready for the Satanists to also put their poster in there. And I hate kind of the waste of time argument, because this process belongs to all of us, and ideas that you or I might think are dumb, other people think are important, and it's not. So I'm cautious about that, but this just seems so. I don't know what problem we're solving here.
So let's remove the constitutional argument. I think is very, very clear. Did you watch any of the hearing on 10 Commandments by chance?
Elements of it.
Okay. So I watched quite a bit of it. I thought it was really absolutely astonishing that people who are supporters of this, and a big chunk of the legislative committee, who were basically saying, we've got all these problems in our schools with kids, misbehaving, this, and this, that if we put up this poster, it's going to solve those problems. In what world does putting a poster up in a school solve the real issues that we're having with behavioral health, mental health, parents who aren't, stable with addiction and other things? They literally, some of them are saying, well, if we put up this poster, it is going to change these outcomes. That's like suggesting I put up a poster at my school that says don't do drugs, and therefore nobody's going to ever do drugs again. I mean, it's not serious legislating.
It's magical thinking.
Yeah.
Or if I do this thing that sort of makes me feel good culturally, because it tickles whatever erogenous zones or whatever I have for this issue, it's magical thinking. It's not going to change anything in terms of kids' behavior or anything else. It's
the idea that some kid steals things, that he's going to see on a poster, you know what? I'm not supposed to steal, so I'm not going to do this. That doesn't solve why is this kid stealing stuff. You know what's wrong.
There's also an assumption there that you're going to behave better if you adhere to the Christian doctrine of all this, which listen, there are many paths to being a good human being. Many of them lead through Christianity, no question about it. Some of them lead through Judaism. Some of them lead through being a Muslim. Some of them, dare I say, lead through atheism. It doesn't have a place there, but the sort of the belief that it's absolutely.
But Rob, rest assured, it's not an unfunded mandate from the state, because the state's going to pay to print those posters and put them in every classroom, in every university classroom in the state.
Which would not be an insignificant. Although the bill does explicitly allow for organizations to donate. So maybe they could argue that churches would donate, and maybe there are groups out there, I don't know.
And let's not ignore the fact state law is already permissive to if a school wants to hang the 10 commandments and risk the lawsuits and all, they can do that.
Well, it's funny because the next bill that we're talking about is a bill. And by the way, Representative Jeff Hoverson, Republican from Minot, introduced the 10 Commandments bill. Another bill deals with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I know actually Representative Anna Novak, she's the sponsor of the bill. She actually talked a little bit about this on a previous show while you and I were off. But her bill actually, one of the things it does is it adds, there's I don't know what you want to call it, an indemnification and a release from liability for school boards and school officials. It already exists, basically giving them immunity for liability for posting the 10 Commandments. And her bill would add the Pledge of Allegiance to that, in addition to mandating that every student rise, put their hand over their heart. If you're a male, removing your headgear, and women apparently can wear hats, but if you're a boy, you're not allowed to wear your hat during the Pledge of Allegiance. Put your hand over your heart and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And if you don't want to do it, you can get a permission slip from your parents to not allow you to do it. Oh, you don't have to take off your headgear if it's there for religious reasons. And again, I will say this. First of all, I thought, just to give you I am very patriotic. Back when we had sports stars, kneeling during the national anthem, while I understood at times their motivations, I thought it was disrespectful. And frankly, as a political tactic, I thought it was counterproductive to their ends. And I think in hindsight, we can argue I was right, or people who made that argument were right. So I don't like it. I am very much a believer in these things. My problem is it should be a choice. I don't know. You're not promoting patriotism. You're not saying, hey, liberty lovers, let's teach you how to love liberty by making you stand up and pledge allegiance to the United States. That is not liberty.
Yeah. Forced patriotism is not real patriotism. And what I want is for our schools to teach our children accurate history, math, science, soft skills, all those different things. And I think our kids are going to be proud of this country. Yeah. I'm proud of this country. I don't think it's perfect. Would I say the pledge? Yes, of course. Do I think my kid would say the pledge? Yes, of course. He may. I don't know if he does or not at his school. I did when I was a kid, right? But again, to force it, much like we tried to force school boards to have to say it before every meeting, it's not real patriotism if the government is telling you that you have to do something.
Yeah. Although, were the school members required to say the pledge, or was it just that they had to make like have it on the agenda?
Something I don't know. Yeah, but it came from Fargo choosing not to, they did it for a while and then they chose to stop doing it and it became a thing.
And by the way, the people on the other side making the fact that they were doing it a thing is equally silly.
Yeah,
these are not serious initiatives.
Rob, I will tell you, I felt the same way about the Carter flag and bringing it down or not bringing it down for Trump's inaugural. I think both sides are being pretty dumb on that one. Yeah. It's not that big of a deal. Do I think Kelly should have not done it? Probably. But at the same time, pick your fights. I mean, Kelly's got to pick his fights and with the right wingers. And this was an easy one for him to say, yeah, put the flags at full mast on the 20th.
I wrote about it, and my argument was that this was, in a different context, it's reasonable. Although I will point out there is federal law that says that the flags have to be lowered for 30 days after a president dies. That is in federal law. Now, I think that federal law is a little silly. Again, getting into the whole forced, if we're forcing people to mourn Jimmy Carter, how genuine is that? And then also, I have a problem. We're lowering the flags too much to the point where it doesn't mean anything anymore. People are driving by and they're like, why are the flags lower? Nobody knows because they're lowered like 80% of the time. So what are we doing? So it's lost. It's like sonic satiation. We just say the word over and over again until it just loses all meaning. That's what we've done to lowering the flags. That being said, the fact that it was a result of Donald Trump throwing a tantrum, a better sort of human being would just not care, would just say, of course, honor Jimmy Carter. And, I'm going to be inaugurated and I don't need this because it's just a thing. I don't like that Donald Trump could just sort of issue an edict and people fall in line. I hate that. But
I hate it too, but in the grand scheme of fights for the governor to pick.
yeah,
Uh,
I think that's fair. You're being nicer to Kelly than I was. Although I don't think I was being mean to Kelly, but
I don't think, and I'm guessing that the conversation in the governor's office, obviously we weren't there, was probably like Kelly saying, yeah,
whatever.
just sure, whatever, let's talk about the budget, let's talk about these things.
Let's how about let's get ready for this property tax hearing we're about to have.
Yeah.
Because that's what's really important. So that's
What did you think of the property tax hearing?
I thought it went well. It was not unexpected that the caps are the bugaboo. And really I mean when I first wrote about I got a I don't want to say a copy, but I got an advanced copy of before his speech. I got I wasn't special. Lots of people in the news media got advanced copies of his embargoed speech, as well as an informational page. And when I first read it, and when I wrote about it, my mind went immediately, the caps are the linchpin to this thing. If you don't have the cap, this is just another buy down. And I think that became clear, and that's going to be the bone of contention is the caps. Now, it did sound like some wiggle room. I know Aaron Burst from the North Dakota Association of Counties, they don't. I mean, it was critical of the cap, even though it said I think they said they were officially neutral on the caps. They don't really like it, but they're open to budget. I don't know what he called them, restrictions or what have you.
Yeah.
I guess I don't.
I will.
The caps are the thing. If we don't have a restriction on budget growth, then all we're doing is just a big transfer of wealth from state to local with no guarantee your taxes will go down.
Yeah, I thought Matt Gardner from the League of Cities had really, really good testimony. Basically came up, supported the bill, supported all the buy downs and that kind of stuff, increasing of the homestead tax credit, and then basically said, hey, we don't like the idea of caps, but we want to be at the table. You're doing 3%. Here's our concern with 3%. We think a better way of do caps would be CPI or something like that, but we want to be part of that conversation. I'm impressed that the political subs, historically, they'd come to a hearing like that and say, heck no to caps. But I got the impression from cities and counties that they're willing to be at the table. Gardner did get some pushback from Headland, which basically said, hey, I talked to my city and our increases are averaging 4 point something or whatever. So if the cap is 6% or 5%, you're not actually capping. You're just continuing the same thing with an artificial cap that doesn't matter. So I don't think this bill is going to fly through as quickly as Kelly would have liked it to, because I think there's going to be some work that needs to be done. And I also think there's probably a little bit of consternation about the cost. And one of the things Farmers Union brought up was the idea of, do we cap the benefit at some point, right? I mean, if you're getting $4,500 or $4,000 or $3,000 down the line, at some point, do we cap that benefit? And it doesn't officially get rid of all of your property taxes if you're in $1 million house. I think that's a conversation to have as well. I thought the hearing was good, and only one, Mike Blessum, opposed the bill. But even the groups that you could say didn't really like it said they supported the bill.
I think after Measure 4, I think that's the political position they're in. And I suspect privately they dislike the bill a lot more than they let on.
Well, hold on. They didn't dislike the reform part of the bill. Well,
of course, they like the massive amount of money that Kelly wants to throw at them. And when I say throw at them, it's a credit to the property owners,
right?
But it's a lot of money. So but the caps the linchpin. I did laugh at Mike Blessum, who last session was before the legislature asking for them to implement a statutory cap on legislative spending, and is now opposing a cap on city spending. That guy is one of my city councilors. Also famous for trying to disenfranchise the District 46 delegates at the North Dakota Republican Convention last year. That guy is all performance and not a lot of stuff.
And I will tell you, the Scott Lauser property tax bill was heard this morning.
Yeah.
The difference in how packed the rooms were yesterday for Kelly's bill, the Nathy bill, versus Lauser's bill, It's pretty clear which one's going to be the vehicle. There was nobody in the room today
Well, the leader,
at all the stats.
the legislative leaders are on one bill and not the other, and I don't think that's unfair, and I don't even know that that's a shot at Scott Lauser. I mean,
I don't think it is either.
at some point, they got to choose one of these bills as the skeleton for what they're going to build, and I think just it makes sense to choose the governor's bill and build on that one.
Yeah, and I just hope. I mean, Representative Lauser has put a lot of thought into his bill. I just hope they don't completely ignore everything that he has suggested.
Well, and Kelly made it clear. I mean, some of the ideas he stole from Bowser's bill. There's elements of that in there, so
Right.
it's not like I would not be surprised if by the time they're done doing surgery on this thing, it's going to be different. I think everybody understands that. That's the process. I'm not opposed to that. But what I'm saying is we have got to hold the line on caps, and the caps have to be effective. Otherwise, this is just another buy down.
Right. No, and I think that I got the sense everybody in that room, Republican or Democrat, gets that something needs to be done. Everybody, again, except for Blessum, I think he wants to get rid of all property taxes, was supportive.
I think he's there to poison pill this bill because they want Measure 4. I think that's where what his thing is.
But I sense there's, for the Measure 4 people who said, they're not going to do anything. They're not going to do anything. They're doing something. They're not going to leave Bismarck without something getting done.
I hope you're right. But if they cave on caps,
yeah, I mean, again, I think there's going to be caps. What does that cap look like, right? I mean, I also think political subs need to be very, very careful. They've got this 5-year rollover. They don't want to put their heels in too deeply where all of a sudden they're losing that rollover or they're losing the ability to go above the cap. I mean, I think they need to be careful here.
Yeah. So I hope you're right. What I'm afraid is that we're going to get a cap that's a fig leaf, and then. I hope that's not what we get. But if we do that properly, it's going to be another failure. And I swear to God, the next ballot measure is going to pass.
Well, and Rob, I will tell you, as the chairman of the Vote No on Measure 4 and a guy who helped raise nearly $2 million, much of came from my organization, we're not doing this again. And so if the legislature doesn't do anything and doesn't do something substantial, they're going to have to figure out how to defeat the next Measure 4. I don't think most of these groups are coming back.
Let's talk charitable gaming, which is going to be another fascinating debate. There's a bill that I made a small error in my column where I said it was Senator Yana Myrdal's bill. It was actually introduced on behalf of the judiciary. It's not her specific bill. She agrees with it. But I think the Senate Judiciary Committee. I forget who this exact
interim judiciary.
It was the interim judiciary bill, but she was the one because she's on that committee. And she was the one making the case for it. She certainly supports it. But just to be clear on that front, but basically, I mean, we have an issue, and what the bill is seeking to address is, if you read the North Dakota Constitution. Gambling, first of all, it has a prohibition of gambling, but then it has a loophole in there for what we call colloquially as charitable gaming. And it actually lists the purposes for which gaming revenue, people can host gambling to generate revenues for. And it's things like veterans groups, charities are explicitly mentioned. It's things like fraternal organizations,
education,
religious organizations, although there's only 2 of those, which I think is kind of funny that a religious organization would sponsor gambling.
Well, there's more than 2. There's a third one. It's under education, and that's the Catholic schools here in Bismarck. Right, taking some money from charitable gaming.
That's interesting.
It is.
But the thing is one of them is public spirited. And the problem is in the Constitution is it lists all those other things: public safety, civic service, charitable, fraternal, and then it says, and any other public-spirited organization. And that is the problem, is we're getting a little carried away with just about everything is public-spirited. And if you look at the number of, there are currently 337 organizations in the state of North Dakota that are licensed for charitable gaming. 164 of them are under this public-spirited category. That is 70% more than the next 2 categories, which are veterans and public safety combined. The number of charitable organizations, we call it charitable gaming, the number of charitable organizations that fall under the charitable gaming is just 23 out of 337. And the thing is, if you start looking at some of these public-spirited organizations, some of the ones that are currently pending right now, there's a skydiving group out of Fargo. There's a fireworks group out of Minot. There's a baseball team out of Bismarck, which, by the way, is co-owned by a state lawmaker, Glenn Bosch. I like the idea of, I mean, obviously we're baseball fans. I like the idea. I love the Bismarck Larks. I'm glad they exist.
Right. I've got a 7-pack of tickets to the Bismarck Larks. I do my part.
Yeah, well, you should invite me along sometime. I mean, I like that these things, but if that's the definition of public spirited, it's just we're going to offer a fun service to the community, then what business, whether you're a video arcade or a trampoline park or a bar or a restaurant, can't organize itself? And by the way, we have bars that are owned by nonprofits already. We're already doing this. But I mean, if that's the public spirited, everything can be a nonprofit and everything can be funded by gambling. And now we're Las Vegas.
Rob, I've got an idea. You ready for this?
Yeah.
I think you and I should set up an LLC for Plain Talks podcast, because I think our podcast is publicly spirited, and I think that we should start funding this thing through charitable gaming.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think that's the spirit of the law when it was passed?
And we can record the podcast over satellite internet from our yacht somewhere. I mean, again, we're talking, I mean, this has grown so much. We are talking billions of dollars in revenues that this kicks off. It is.
Yeah, and so what is the strategy to rein this in?
Well, right now,
like, is there going to be a bill to, like, is that what Murdahl's trying to do, is rein this in? And what does that look like?
Yeah. So when I spoke with Deb McDaniel, who is the head of the gaming division and has been on the podcast previously, one of the things she said is that basically her office doesn't have discretion here. It's not up to her to decide what public spirited means. Right now, the law is written as it's written. And if an organization complies with the law, she has to issue the permit. That's her job right now. And so I think what they're hoping for is a definition that narrows this down a little bit. Because otherwise, I mean, there's a ski resort in Pembina that is going to be funded by charitable gaming. I mean, I think North Dakotans need to decide, how much gambling do you want in our communities, first of all? And second of all, what sort of organizations do we really want involved in this? Like, if we're going to say that it's charitable gaming, when I think of charity, I think of like a food pantry. I think of an organization that helps disabled people get to their doctor's appointments. I don't think of skydiving. I don't think it's a semi-pro baseball team.
Does it matter what their tax status is? I mean, do they have to be a C3 charity in order to be one of these public spirited groups?
They have to be a nonprofit. I don't know if they specifically have to be a C3.
Okay. Because I would think this would be easy to define, right? I mean, in order to get a tax deduction, it has to be a C3, right? It can't be a C4 that can do political activity or other things like that. But yeah, it needs to be reined in, because we might as well just have for-profit gambling. And maybe that's where we're headed here eventually, but it's out of control.
Well, if we're going to do that, and the libertarian in me, I mean, we're at a place right now, I mean, I'm watching a baseball game and FanDuel's on there. I can make bets from my couch. The idea that we're restricting gambling, I mean, maybe there's an argument to be made that, hey, if people are going to gamble, we may as well, create some jobs and some entrepreneur opportunities in North Dakota. Maybe it should just be legalized. And I think, by the way, the charities that are, if you looked at the people who were lined up against Yana Murdahl's bill, it was a lot of the, quote unquote charitable organizations, that were, they don't want to be locked out. My argument to them is, if this train keeps rolling and North Dakotans get used to seeing what are amounts of slot machines and gambling everywhere, we're going to reach a point where the gambling industry is going to decide they don't need the fig leaf of charitable gaming anymore, and they're going to cast you out.
Yeah, and I don't know why a legit charity, who did blackjack and the regular pull tabs before we brought in e-tabs, wouldn't want some sort of regulation, because eventually there's too much competition, right? I mean, how does Prairie Public Radio compete with hockey booster clubs in every community in the state? And, that's another thing. It's out of control.
I don't have any specific information, but if as somebody who's done this for a very long time, when you look at the tidal wave of money that has flown into what were previously some very small, largely volunteer organizations, we're going to have, I think, a reckoning of court cases and everything else about people misappropriating some of this money. I mean, already we're seeing organizations that clearly have more money than they know how to spend.
Yeah, you're going to have laundering issues, but you're also going to have organized crime issues at some point, right? I mean, this is a largely cash business with loose regulations. I mean, this is begging for big time problems.
Yeah.
And especially if we're letting anybody who claims to be publicly spirited do this, it's begging for trouble. It's begging for a lot of work for Drew Wrigley's office.
I think it's where we got to get started, because public spirited, I don't know what that means. And there's a reason why that is by far the biggest category. That's the loophole in the law that everyone's driving through. So that's it's going to be a very interesting debate. I wrote about that. I thought it was a pretty interesting article. All right, we're going to put a pin in it there. We're done with this episode. We do have some exciting news. We arrived at a date for a live show for Plain Talk, which I think is terrifying in a lot of ways. And people who know me know that I don't really like being around people that much. So the idea of doing this in front of a group of people gives me the hives. But our producer, Matt, says we had to do, much like he also said that Chad and I had to put our arms around each other and get our picture taken during a recent photo shoot for
And then smile over our shoulders at each other.
That was so weird.
Nothing says, hey, happy day after Christmas than awkward.
I trust Matt, and I think he does a great job, and I'm so happy he's working with us. I don't know. We're going to see who might actually want to show up and watch us record this live, but it's going to be at Peacock Alley. It's going to be on the 19th. We'll have more details as time goes forward, so that'll be a lot of fun.
Are we going to have like some really fancy guests on that thing?
Well, we're going to have to. I mean, if it's live, we're going to have somebody to put butts in the seats.
Yeah. Should we do is it, I mean, just the 1 hour, or should we really expand it?
I don't know.
Let's spitball while we're recording.
What we have now, Chad, is a date and a time and a location.
Okay.
So from there, we're going to put some meat on much like the property tax bill. We have a framework.
Yep.
We're going to have to develop it. By the way, coming up on Friday, Dickinson Mayor Scott Decker is going to be on. Interesting turn of events. You know, we've had a sort of a recall campaign that's been ongoing. People asserting that city officials, including Mayor Decker, didn't take the oath of office right. You know, there was legal challenge over the recall, or not. Legal squabbling, I should say, over the recall. But we got to a point where they did successfully, you know, turn in petitions to recall a member of the Dickinson City Council. And then the recall organizer, who said he was going to be a candidate, let the deadline for filing go by. And now the city of Dickinson is going to be paying $20,000 for a recall where the recalled official is going to be running unopposed.
Bill
Yeah.
Bill the people.
We're going to be talking about, because I mean, that sounds like a hyper-local Dickinson issue, but again, it's so many of the themes that we've been talking about so much on this show. I think that's going to be
We have a low bar. We have a low bar in terms of signatures to recall somebody. This crap is going to continue to accelerate unless there's some sort of reins put on. I mean, I'm all for recalling somebody for real, Ethan.
I like the recall process.
Auditor Splonskowski, for example, I'd be all for that. But just because you don't like somebody, or you think, I mean, I don't know what this whole didn't take the oath crap is.
I get upset when I see people abusing things like open records laws, abusing things, because that's another thing. The city of Dickinson also, they've moved the timing of their public comment period, because if you've watched, I've gone and watched some of the recent, and the people that are getting up there are talking, I mean, it's anti-Semitic. It has nothing to do with city business. I mean, you're abusing it. And when people abuse those things, they put pressure on closing down the government. And when the government becomes less transparent, that hurts us all. So nobody should be against people abusing the recall process. I don't want to make the recall process harder. I'm glad it exists.
Neither do I.
So anyway, we're going to be talking about all that come Friday. Thank you.
Travis Fink at 10:30 to talk about
Travis Fink at 10:30 as well. Yes, that's right. Which was another big hearing where before the Senator Probst, right? Yeah. I've watched so many committee hearings this week. It was before the Senate probes where he's talking, very near a constitutional crisis. Every person charged with a crime in the courts has a right to an attorney. And the safety net to make sure everybody has an attorney, even the people who can't afford one, is indigent defense. And we are not funding them. They are so far
We're
behind.
understaffed, and I can't wait to hear more about their lack of investigators. They have one investigator for the whole state. They have lawyers who have 50 to 100 cases at one time. How can they do right by these clients?
I really tune
with
in on
those kind of numbers.
I really tune in on the investigator part. That's the family business. I worked in that business for 10 years. We did criminal defense all the time. My sister works for the federal public defender's office as an investigator today. My father is retired now, but he did it for years after his career in law enforcement. So I am very passionate about that. And I can tell you those investigators matter. And they help.
When these starting attorneys get paid like 70 grand.
Yeah. In this office,
Good luck paying back your student loans.
this office handles 80% of the felonies. Like their clients, I mean, that represents 80% of the felony cases in the state of North Dakota. So anyway, he's going to be on as well. Hot show on Friday. You're going to want to tune in. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again.
That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
I do like a splash of color on my face.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think men should tell each other that they're handsome more often. Women compliment each other all the time. Men don't do it enough.
Well, let's not do it here, though.